Let's talk about the Rose Bowl. Dan, we have a final.
Yeah.
Indiana 38, Alabama 3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let me repeat that for the people in the back. Indiana 38, Alabama 3. I believe Indiana's first bowl win since the year of our Lord, 1991. It has been a minute since Indiana got anywhere close to this.
Yes.
Here we are on New Year's Day, the Indiana Hoosiers advancing through, not just beating Alabama, advancing into the Final Four for a rematch with your beloved Oregon Ducks.
Yeah.
This, my friends, is what you call a thorough beatdown.
Guess who just got murdered?
Before we went live, I went into our beautiful Discord chat, and I asked the fine folks there, which sound do I even play to signify what we saw here on display?
Yeah.
Crock-potting, murdered. Do I make something else? I tried to pull from like a My Cousin Vinny. I could use a good ass kicking. I'll be very honest. I couldn't find anything that I thought properly symbolized what we just witnessed. This was a thorough beatdown from Curt Cignetti, Fernando Mendoza, and the Indiana Hoosiers.
At some point, I feel like I pulled the sound from the 5-finger death punch from Kill Bill. If you remember that scene.
Yeah.
Where all the nerve endings or whatever are immediately destroyed. Yeah, it was thorough. It was lethal. And it was, I guess, kind of hard to watch if you are at all like a Bama fan or a fan of a competitive game or just like somebody who believes in the humanity of man to watch what happened to Alabama in 4K where available. Indiana's been this team. They haven't always been this team against the best teams on their schedule, right? The Oregon game was tied in the fourth quarter. It was a game against Ohio State, both playoff teams. I'm not always, but in the last few weeks, I've questioned the validity of Alabama's inclusion in this postseason, but they won their opening round game. They came back in impressive fashion. They clearly belonged against the Oklahoma defense that had been so good. Indiana just, whistle to whistle, bell to bell, whatever, destroyed them in every phase. And I guess it was a little bit close early, right? There were moments where you're like, well, Ty Simpson might be moving the ball a little bit, and then he fumbled it. Like there were moments, I guess, where it kind of seemed like Alabama, because of their talent on defense or something like that, and they forced a field goal after a long drive early on. We were like, well, okay, maybe they'll settle into this, right? It's a lot of travel across the country for both of these teams. Weird layoff for Indiana. Maybe we'll see if that comes and bites them. No, not at all. They were completely immune to any sort of layoff rust. I think I saw on game day they were having a conversation about rusted versus rested. Indiana was rested.
Oh yeah.
Indiana was they got a great night's sleep and they performed.
Well, when Fernando Mendoza gave his little TED talk in the post-game interview, he did
I saw a lot of people talking about, yeah.
Yeah, well, he did. I mean, he's a great interview. He spoke to it a little bit, how the first couple drives took a little bit to get back in the swing of things. They had so much time off, but after that, it was just a ball rolling downhill. Fernando Mendoza in this game, of course, now your Heisman Trophy winner, 14 of 16, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns, of course, no interceptions. I don't know what the final stat line ended up being, but at one point in the third quarter, he was something like 7 of 7 passing when Alabama decided to blitz him. It was, again, one of those deals where we talked about this, too, as we tried to figure out what was going to happen in this one.
Right.
But how do you stop the guy? Do you blitz? Do you not blitz? Do you try to throw something new at him? We've heard time and again about his preparation, really the preparation of a Curt Cignetti team, that it seemed like it would be a bit of a shocking result if, in fact, they were throwing new things at Mendoza that he hadn't seen, that completely confused him and turned him into a player other than what we have seen so far this season.
Right.
That clearly did not happen. He was ready for this. It didn't seem as if they had really any formula to try and stop him. For the most part, he was unflappable. Again, only missing 2 passes throughout the course of the game before they eventually pulled him in favor of his younger brother about midway through the fourth quarter. The other element of this game on the Indiana side, and I promise we'll talk a little bit about Alabama.
16 throws, by the way. 16 attempts.
That's all it took. That's all it took
to drop 40 on Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Yeah.
And the further point there is the physicality of Indiana, which we could talk about Mendoza until we're blue in the face, and we could talk about the fact that Indiana ran for over 200 yards on 50 attempts, 2 touchdowns. I mean, the physicality that we saw on both sides of the line of scrimmage from Indiana, to me, remains the story. Because if you had traveled to like the year of our Lord 2021 and tried to convince young Dan Rubenstein and younger Ty Hildenbrandt that we would see a matchup in 2026 in which Indiana out-physicaled Alabama, we would laugh at the mere idea of that even being a possibility. The remotest possibility. This is so far removed from what we would have thought a couple of years ago. But Curt Cignetti has obviously taken hold in Bloomington. He has worked miracles in very short order, got him to the playoff last year, gets him back to the playoff this year as the number 1 overall seed with the first round bye. The fact that they went up against a traditional blue blood, a place where Cignetti used to coach, and were this physical and this dominant, to me, is overwhelmingly the story in this game. The final was 38-3. We could sit here and read stats if we really want to. My hunch is that the people at home already know the result and don't care about that. To me, the theme of this and what I'm going to take away, not just throughout this course of the playoffs now, but really as we think about this season 6 months down the road, Indiana's ability to dominate on both sides of the line of scrimmage was damn impressive.
Yes, it absolutely was. And we talk a lot about games and try to put games into context where it's something like, yes, that was close, but they had like a bunch of short fields. They had a 3-yard drive and had a 9-yard drive. And so that sort of skews how successful they were when they actually had regular drives. Indiana turned the ball over once. Alabama turned the ball over once.
No,
it wasn't a crazy penalty thing. It wasn't like a 5 interception thing for Alabama and pick sixes and everything that ran this score up. Everything Indiana did worked.
No.
Every time they had a 3rd and 4, they figured out how to get 6.5. Every time they sort of set Alabama up to think something was going to happen in the run game, the play action took hold downfield. You know, the beautiful Fernando Mendoza touchdown pass to, I think it was Charlie Becker for 20 plus yards or something early on, right? Like everything is just so crisp about Indiana in everything that they do. If you're going to succeed against Indiana, you're going to do so one-on-one. You're going to do so because your guys somehow win more one-on-one battles, and it's close. That you need perfection on every snap to be competitive, not just with Indiana, but any team like Indiana. We've seen Bama teams like this. We've seen LSU teams like this. We've seen Ohio State teams like this. And Indiana just plays with that style and with that intensity where every single 2nd and 7 is the most important play ever to this Indiana defense, right? And so that's coaching, that's belief, you know, on the roster, and that is just an unbelievable amount of preparation and focus. And so they are well coached. They execute super well. They have great. They were without their best, arguably their best defensive lineman, and they will be for the entirety of this playoff. And Stephen Daly, who got injured against Ohio State, I think celebrating or whatever it was, a weird circumstance. Indiana's that team, and I truly am doing everything I can to avoid going the route of like, well, maybe Bama shouldn't have been there. Maybe they were exposed. Maybe this is who they've been. Like we saw it in the SEC championship game, and that's worthwhile. And that's where, you know, part of my gut goes. But if they were a fraud, this is what a legitimate team would do against that fraudulent team. So I don't take a single molecule away from Indiana, no matter what you think of Alabama and how legit or not they actually were this season.
Well, and I think that's a really valid point because, you know, I mean, we do our thing here, and part of why people tune in is for us to be goofballs about these results.
Sure.
And to make fun of things whenever we can. And obviously we appreciate the chance to add a healthy layer of snark to most of what we
Hold
see
on, that'll be the closing portion of this.
Right. No, we can get to that if we really want to, depending on how long this goes. But this was such a thorough ass kicking that I think it almost rises above that.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about whether or not Alabama should have been here, whether or not they deserved it, whether or not this exposed them or Kalen DeBoer or anything like that. I just think what we saw was a really good team on display. And I'm not so sure it mattered whether it was Alabama or Oregon or
Sure.
Notre Dame, if Notre Dame had made it in, or really anybody in this field. Thus far, this was about the most complete performance we have seen throughout the course of the playoff. And I don't think there's much argument about that.
And by the way, they were one of those teams with a layoff.
They were one of those teams with the layoff. First team with the first round bye in the 2 years now of the 12-team field to actually emerge victorious. The rust bothered them for about 1.5 drives, at which point Indiana flipped the switch, and then that was all she wrote. But my broader point is just that I, too, am fighting the urge to kind of go the route of jokes, because I think it almost is a disservice to what Indiana did. And I almost don't even know if it says anything about Alabama based on how good and how efficient Indiana looked in this one.
Well, here's what we know. Indiana dominated Alabama in every phase. Alabama, not a significant amount of time into the game, benched their starting quarterback, who was a legit Heisman threat 2/3 of the way through the season. He was beat up too, to be clear, right? He had taken hits. I think he had gone to the tent. But Austin Mack was in at quarterback and wasn't all that much more successful. Had a nice throw, I think, to Jeremy Bernard down the right sideline, but otherwise was kept at bay. Indiana's the number one team in the country for a reason. And one of the things I said before we started, and it's just sort of an aside, was if we're all kind of agreeing that Nick Saban is one of one in terms of college football analytical thinkers.
Right. Sure.
And his entire job is looking at Indiana tape, looking at Alabama tape. And he came to the conclusion that, yes, it's Alabama. Now, obviously, I know he has history with Bama and he has an office on campus and stuff like that.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
It's still weird that he would go on national TV, knower of things, and say, I like Bama here. Have them lose by 38-3, by 35 points. That was kind of funny to me. That clip was going around the picks after the fact. I don't know what to make of whatever you want to say about Alabama or the SEC or whatever. I just want to keep the focus on Indiana and their preparation. And one of the things that was striking to me, because I had an emotional interest in the Oregon game, was I am not a fan of Dante Moore running the ball, whether it's a called run, whether it's a scramble. His nose for the lane, his nose for open grass, his ability to get past the first down marker or whatever, get into field goal range with his legs, whatever the case. That's just not who he is as a quarterback. Fernando Mendoza navigating the pocket when nothing is there to find a lane to get 8 yards on 3rd and 7 is, I think, the most underrated part of his game, because he's cerebral, he has the arm, he has the athleticism to buy himself time to scan downfield and make plays, he has the ability to diagnose defenses before the snap, all of the obvious things that made him a Heisman winning quarterback. I just don't think we should neglect the fact that his legs and extending drives, I think they were 9 of 14 on 3rd down. They didn't even attempt a 4th down, because why would they? I think his legs are just an underrated part. We talked about it a little bit in the preview and what Indiana might try to accomplish in the red zone. But it was when it's not there, to make something out of nothing, to turn a possible sack into a 4-yard gain, to a 7-yard gain, whatever. His eye and his balance and his footwork, I think, were just, again, Heisman winner. This is nothing new. But against Alabama's front, to navigate it like he did, it's just another feather in his cap.
One of the more eye-popping stats about Fernando Mendoza, and we could talk about his completion percentage being somewhere 72%, only threw a handful of interceptions all year, over 30 touchdowns. I mean, all of the numbers that people recognize on the quarterbacking front were there clearly to win the Heisman Trophy. But the idea of him being mobile in the pocket, even though, as Kirk Herbstreit, I think, aptly put it on the broadcast, he does kind of run like a baby giraffe. If you look at what he did so far this season, averaged over 6.5 per carry. And furthermore, about 69% of the time, got to the first down chains when he was running the football.
Right. Totally.
Okay, so this isn't just running for the sake of running. This is often running with purpose. And more often than not, this is getting to the chains and extending a drive. Mm-hmm. So whether it is by hook or by crook, the guy is figuring out a way to get it done. Clearly, we know he's a cerebral player. He understands the defense and what they're trying to throw at him long before the game is even being played. But again, he gets it done. He serves as a great engineer for this Curt Cignetti offense. And you cannot say enough good things about how they were able to, A, be physical at the line of scrimmage, and then B, beyond that, be very efficient, execute whenever they needed to, and really control the tempo and the tone of this game the full way through. Again, save for maybe like 2 drives in the very beginning. That to me is super impressive, and it's going to continue being impressive now as we go into this Final Four, where, by the way,
yes,
Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, we're going to have a rematch between the Indiana Hoosiers and your Oregon Ducks. I have not seen, as we're recording this very early, right after the game, what the point spread is going to be in that matchup, what the odds makers think.
I saw something. It was like 2.5 during the game. Was Indiana would be favored by 2.5 points against Oregon should Indiana win against Alabama. So that was a mid-game line.
Based on what I saw today, I would be inclined to put most of my life savings on Indiana minus 2 points.
Good news for Oregon fans.
It's very good news for the Oregon fans out there, yourself included.
Yeah.
But what are your initial thoughts now as we are headed into a rematch a week from today?
I favor Indiana, just my gut right now. Just when a team plays that well with that kind of layoff, and now that they're going to be more in a rhythm ahead of and during their preparation for the Oregon game, and have now film on Oregon against Texas Tech and see what did and didn't work, and a lot didn't quite work for this Oregon offense, though there was still a good amount of success against Texas Tech. I favor Indiana just because of the execution, and that they're so well coached and that they can win in a number of ways. And this was a game, obviously, in Eugene. And so, Oregon fans would be quick to point out that like Dante Moore has improved and Oregon has improved since then. And their defense just pitched a shutout, which Indiana's basically did as well. Indiana's improved since that game too.
Yeah.
Everybody's allowed to the potential and the possibility to improve. So it's hard to look at Indiana when they go undefeated and say like, well, obviously they've improved. You just assume they've been this good this whole time. This is Fernando Mendoza's first year in this program. So he's picking up new things every week. This is Dante Moore's second year in the program, and he has improved in his first year starting. But I think I favor Indiana. It's on a neutral site. It's inside, right? It's in Atlanta inside. So the elements won't play a role here. I don't know. I think Oregon is still prone to some weirdness that Indiana isn't. I think Oregon's defense can be incredible like it was today. Indiana's defense was basically incredible all season long. They didn't play in any shootouts or anything like that. Even their close calls against whatever Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State and Ohio State, they weren't like winning 38-35. So they don't make mistakes.
No.
Oregon occasionally makes mistakes. And so, again, if Oregon's going to win that game, I think it's going to be a lot like that first matchup. Like maybe they get a pick six or a very tiny field like they did in that first matchup. But they're going to need to capitalize and basically play perfect offense. And they're going to have to do much more in those high leverage moments than what they were able to do against Texas Tech. So that's my initial read. And I just think you're asking more of Oregon in this moment to show more than they consistently showed on both sides of the ball. Whereas you're just asking Indiana to, play within like a standard deviation of what they normally do.
The initial line at time of recording, I am just seeing this come across now, is Indiana -4.
Mm-hmm.
This game is going to take place on Friday night, January 9th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It is on ESPN. We will obviously be covering that one in great detail here in very short order. But in the meantime, the Indiana Hoosiers move to 14-0, still the only undefeated team in FBS college football. They knock off the Alabama Crimson Tide. Alabama closes out its season 11-4. It's going to be a very important offseason, I think, for Kalen DeBoer and the Alabama football program to see what they do to try and shore things up and make sure that we don't have a repeat performance of this next year. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of talk about Kalen DeBoer and whether he's the right guy. But
hold on. It's not there will be. There has been and will continue to be. By the way, I'm not saying it's funny. I'm not saying we should giggle about it, but it is interesting that Kalen DeBoer at least received information, even if it wasn't fully reciprocal, received interest from both Penn State and Michigan, and like issued a statement. I'm good. We love it here. We're working on a new deal. That Alabama, if it hasn't happened yet, or recently did happen, has to send the agent of Kalen DeBoer a PDF that indicates that he's getting a massive raise or some sort of substantial promises about NIL or whatever based on the leverage he had with Penn State and Michigan interest, reportedly, after losing the Rose Bowl 38-3
Yeah.
to Indiana. That this is the moment in which we have to do everything we can to lock in Kalen DeBoer. That's got to sting a little.
All I'm saying is if this happens again next year, it's going to be like the plot of Argo where they got to sneak him out of there to make sure that he is not taking on any bodily harm, because the natives will grow restless, to say the least, if we've got a 38-point defeat next year in a game such of this magnitude.
I mean, Lane Kiffin will always listen. We know that.
I don't know.
Oh, man.
Listen, I credit Alabama for winning the game a week ago against Oklahoma. And despite the fact that there was on this show and many others out there, and just go online and read what people had to say, everyone had an opinion on Alabama. They won that game in Norman at night.
Totally.
Friday night, the eyes of the college football world upon them. They did capitalize on some breaks. They got some breaks this time around against Oklahoma. To their credit, they executed. They were able to win. They went on a 34-7 run to win that one going away. You cannot take that away from them. Okay. I credit them on that win. That was a tough spot. They got the job done. They met their match. And to be fair, there might be a bunch of teams that meet their match against a team like Indiana with the way that they're playing right now. So all due credit to Bama for getting to this game, but as luck would have it, they ran into a buzzsaw. And it just so happens, again, go back to 2021 and tell a younger version of yourself that that buzzsaw would be the Indiana Hoosiers. Man, what a world in 2026.
By the way, if you want to do something funny, Nike.com has Alabama playoff mode t-shirts 2025. No. So if there are any Auburn fans watching with Alabama people in their family, it's about to be discounted, folks. This $40 charge is about to come down to about 18, maybe 12. I sent it to Ty after Notre Dame was in the Pinstripe Bowl, disappointingly for him, I guess. It's always a worthwhile investment to send somebody a shirt that will pour salt in their wound. It's funny to do to an Ohio State fan. It's funny to do to a Texas A&M fan. It might be funny to do an Oregon fan next week. But those shirts are going to be discounted. And that, by the way, this is something else I thought of. Then we can finish, whatever. Indiana went, what was Indiana's record last season? They lost 2 games?
Yeah.
Okay. So Indiana loses to Ohio State and they lose to Notre Dame last year, and they finish whatever it is, 10-3, 11-2. I don't know, whatever they finish.
Right. 11-2.
What was it?
11-2.
11-2. They did that with Ohio's quarterback, who also had like a torn ACL. So at a certain point, maybe before this season or early on this season, we saw Fernando Mendoza was going there and was going to be pretty good. He was like, well, if they did that with a MAC quarterback with a semi-shredded knee, they might be better with Fernando Mendoza. That's my bad.
Yeah.
That's something I should have recognized in my own soul, and I didn't. But yeah, there's a lot of in retrospect to be said about a lot of these teams right now.
I do think that for those of us who have followed college football our entire lives, when you have a team like this in Indiana that has historically been a doormat, it is very difficult to bend your mind into the appropriate pretzel, to do those mental gymnastics to convince yourself that this is real and that this isn't just a cute story. I think it was very easy to do that last year. They lost the playoff game to Notre Dame. Still a very good team. I thought they acquitted themselves well.
Yeah.
But the mere idea that they could follow that up with a better team.
Yes.
This year, even for us, this is all we do. With all of the information at our fingertips and nothing but time to study these teams, it is still truly fighting against that stigma that I thought flew in my face. I had a hard time with it. I had Illinois over Indiana. I had Indiana like 5th in the Big Ten. So for sure, not going to be making that mistake again. I think Kurt Cignetti and what he has done in just 2 years now in Bloomington very much deserves the benefit of the doubt, regardless of how this season ends. And it's just about time that we recognize in this new world order of college football that stories like this are not only possible, but sustainable if you have the right guy in place and if you have the right infrastructure around the program.
Yeah.
This is a wake-up call for all of us who appreciate this sport, root for the underdog whenever we can, and appreciate a good Cinderella story. Sometimes Cinderella turns into a juggernaut in the short span of 1 year. And kudos to them for doing it, because it is not anything any of us saw coming. And Curt Cignetti obviously deserves all the praise and all the money they want to throw at him.
By the way, to answer your question of like, what would you have said in 2021 if you were told that Indiana was going to just absolutely shellac Alabama in the college football playoff? My first response would have been, what kind of assassin did Tom Allen become? What happened with Tom Allen that he was able to, because in that time you were like, look, Indiana's not great, but they're feisty, right? They go to Penn State. They throw, Michael Penix is obviously a big talent. Like, Kalen DeBoer, offensive coordinator, did nice things for them. So you're just like, you're thinking to yourself, who did Tom Allen become? And obviously that was not to pass, but man, good for the Hoosiers. What can I say?
38-3, your Indiana Hoosiers win the 2026 Rose Bowl. They will advance now to square off against your Oregon Ducks in a rematch in the national semifinal played at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. We appreciate everybody watching. Please leave those comments down below. We appreciate the folks that sent in super chats and many comments as we've done this live. We will be doing one more after the Sugar Bowl. Please make sure you tune in then. In the meantime, for that guy over there, Dan, for myself, Ty, as always, thank you for watching. Appreciate your support and stay safe.